What if I told you that giants weren't just fairy tales? What if they actually walked among us, lived in our cities and shaped our entire world? Picture this. You're walking through an ancient forest, and you stumble upon a massive footprint. Not just big. We're talking 20 inches long. That's bigger than a dinner plate. Your heart starts racing. What could have made this? Well, you're about to discover something that will change everything you thought you knew about human history. Because scattered across every continent on Earth, buried in museums, hidden in government archives, and dismissed by mainstream science, there's overwhelming evidence that giants were real. And they didn't just exist. They lived alongside humans for thousands of years. We're talking about beings 8, 10, even 15 feet tall. Imagine looking up at someone who could use your front door as a window. These weren't monsters from movies. They were intelligent, they built things, they had families, and according to some sources they might still be out there. But here's the crazy part. This isn't some conspiracy theory. The evidence is everywhere. Ancient texts from every culture mention them. Archaeological discoveries keep getting covered up. And the bones? Oh, the bones tell a story that will blow your mind. So buckle up, because we're about to dive deep into the secret history of giants. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never look at ancient ruins the same way again. Let's start with the most shocking evidence, the bones themselves. And boy, do we have some stories to tell. In 1947, a group of archaeologists were digging in Turkey when they found something incredible. A human thigh bone that was 47 inches long. To put that in perspective, a normal human thigh bone is about 18 inches. This thing belonged to someone who was at least 14 feet tall. That's like two basketball players standing on each other's shoulders. But here's where it gets weird. The bone disappeared. Just vanished from the archaeological record. The researchers who found it? They suddenly stopped talking about it. Sound familiar? Because this same pattern happens over and over again. Let's travel to Ohio in 1895. Newspapers across the state reported that workers digging a foundation found an entire cemetery of giant skeletons. We're talking about hundreds of them, some reaching 9 feet tall. The Cincinnati Enquirer wrote about skulls that were of enormous size, and bones that indicated a race of people much larger than the present generation. These weren't just random finds. They were systematic discoveries with measurements, photographs, and detailed reports. The Smithsonian Institution was contacted. They sent representatives to collect everything. And then, poof, gone. The bones, the reports, the photographs. All of it disappeared into their archives, never to be seen again. But wait, it gets even crazier. In 1912, workers in Wisconsin discovered what they called the Lake Delavan giants. 18 skeletons, all between 7 and 9 feet tall, with skulls that were much larger than the heads of any race which inhabit America today. The Milwaukee Journal reported it. The Chicago Tribune covered it. Scientists examined them and confirmed they were human, just massive. Guess what happened next? You got it. The Smithsonian swooped in, took everything, and these incredible discoveries were never mentioned again in official archaeology. Now you might be thinking, come on, surely someone kept records, right? Well, they did. And that's where things get really interesting. A researcher named Richard Dewhurst spent decades digging through old newspaper archives. He found over 1,000 reports of giant skeleton discoveries across North America alone. That's not a few random finds, that's a pattern. Let's hop over to Europe for a second. In Romania, they found giant skeletons in a place called Scieni. Some were 10 feet tall. In Bulgaria, archaeologists discovered skeletons that were 7 to 8 feet tall with massive skulls. In Italy, they found remains of giants that were so large, they couldn't fit in normal burial sites. But here's the kicker. In many of these cases, the skeletons had double rows of teeth. Imagine opening your mouth and having two complete sets of teeth, top and bottom. That's not just big, that's biologically different. We're talking about a potentially different species of human. The evidence isn't just from random grave sites either. In Nevada, miners discovered mummified giants in caves. These weren't just bones, they were preserved bodies, complete with red hair and clothing. The heights ranged from 8 to 12 feet tall. Local Native American tribes, the Paiutes, had legends about red-haired giants who lived in these exact caves thousands of years ago. And get this, when researchers tried to examine these mummies, they hit the same wall. Authorities stepped in, declared the sites culturally sensitive, and access was restricted. The mummies were moved to secure facilities and haven't been seen since. Now, I know what you're thinking. If giants were real, why isn't this in textbooks? That's the million-dollar question. But consider this: every time giant bones are found, they disappear. Every time researchers try to study them, they're shut down. Every time museums display them, they're quietly removed. There's even a term for it in archaeology: inconvenient discoveries. These are finds that don't fit the accepted timeline or narrative of human evolution. And giant bones? They're about as inconvenient as it gets. But the bones aren't the only evidence. Ancient civilizations left us clues everywhere. They built massive structures that would be impossible for normal-sized humans to construct. They carved statues and artwork depicting giants. They wrote detailed accounts of living alongside these massive beings. The question isn't whether giants existed. The evidence is overwhelming. The question is, why is this information being suppressed? And more importantly, if giants lived alongside humans for thousands of years, what happened to them? Did they all die out? Or are they still out there, hidden away from the modern world? The rabbit hole goes deeper than you can imagine. And we're just getting started. What do you think? Have you ever heard stories about giant discoveries in your area? Drop a comment below and let me know. I read every single one, and some of you have shared incredible stories that I might feature in future videos. Here's something that will blow your mind. Every single ancient culture on Earth has stories about giants. And I mean every single one. From the freezing tundra of Alaska to the deserts of Australia, from the jungles of South America to the mountains of Asia, every civilization that ever existed has detailed accounts of giant beings living among humans. Now, that's not a coincidence. That's evidence. Let's start with the most famous source, the Bible. Now, whether you're religious or not, you can't deny that the Bible is one of the most well-documented historical texts we have. And it's absolutely packed with giant references. We're not talking about one or two mentions. We're talking about dozens of detailed accounts. Everyone knows about David and Goliath, right? But here's what most people don't know. Goliath wasn't alone. The Bible describes an entire race of giants called the Nephilim. These weren't just tall people. The text describes them as mighty men of old, men of renown. Some translations say they were fallen ones, or those who fell from heaven. But get this, the Bible gives us specific measurements. Goliath was 6 cubits and a span tall. That's about 9 feet 6 inches. But he wasn't even the biggest. King Og of Bashan had a bed that was 13 feet long and 6 feet wide. Imagine needing a bed that size. The Bible also mentions the Anakim, another race of giants. When Moses sent spies to scout the Promised Land, they came back terrified. They said, "We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them." That's not just tall, that's massive. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Bible isn't the only ancient text that talks about giants. Let's travel to ancient Greece. Homer's Iliad and Odyssey are full of giant references. The Cyclops weren't just mythical creatures. They were described as real beings that Odysseus actually encountered. The Greeks also wrote about the Titans, massive beings who ruled before the gods. The ancient Greeks didn't see these as fairy tales. They saw them as history. They even claimed to have giant bones as proof. The historian Pausanias wrote about giant bones that were displayed in temples. He measured them himself and provided detailed descriptions. Now let's hop over to Norse mythology. The Vikings wrote extensively about giants, called Jotuns. But here's the thing, they didn't write about them as monsters or myths. They wrote about them as neighbors. The Norse sagas describe giants living in specific places, having families, even intermarrying with humans. The Vikings were practical people. They were explorers, traders, warriors. They didn't waste time writing fantasy stories. When they wrote about giants, they were recording what they knew to be true. Jump across the world to ancient India. The Mahabharata, one of the longest epic poems ever written, is full of giant references. It describes beings called Rakshasas who were massive in size and possessed incredible strength. The text gives specific measurements and describes their interactions with normal humans. But it's not just old texts. Native American cultures across North America have incredibly detailed oral histories about giants. The Lakota speak of a race of giant cannibals. The Choctaw have stories about the Nahalo, red-haired giants who lived in their lands. The Paiutes of Nevada tell stories about the Cetacah, red-haired giants who lived in caves. Remember those mummified giants I mentioned earlier? The ones found in Nevada caves? The Paiute legends describe exactly what the archaeologists found: red-haired giants living in caves, right down to the specific locations where the mummies were discovered. Now here's the crazy part. These Native American stories aren't vague legends. They're detailed historical accounts passed down through generations. They describe specific battles, specific locations, even specific burial sites. And when archaeologists dig in these locations, they find exactly what the stories describe. Let's travel to South America. The Inca had legends about the Viracocha, giant beings who helped build their civilization. But these weren't just stories. The Inca claimed to have giant bones as proof. Spanish conquistadors wrote about seeing these bones in Inca temples. In fact, Spanish chronicles from the 1500s are full of giant references. Pedro Cieza de Leon wrote about finding giant bones in Ecuador. He measured them and described them in detail. Other conquistadors reported finding giant skeletons throughout South America. But here's what's really mind-blowing. These accounts from different continents describe the same things. Giants with red hair. Giants with double rows of teeth. Giants who were skilled builders. Giants who lived in specific types of locations like caves or mountains. How is that possible? How could cultures that had never met each other, separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, all describe the same exact type of beings? There's only one logical explanation. They were all describing the same real phenomenon. They were all in contact with the same race of giant beings. Even more recent history is full of giant accounts. Native American tribes told early European settlers about giant bones. These settlers wrote detailed letters and journal entries describing their encounters with these remains. Towns were built around giant burial sites. Local museums displayed giant bones until they mysteriously disappeared. The evidence isn't just in ancient texts. It's in official government records, military reports, and scientific journals from the 1800s and early 1900s. Before the archaeological establishment decided these findings were inconvenient, they were common knowledge. But here's the question that should really make you think. If giants were just myths and legends, why do these stories exist in every culture? Why are the descriptions so consistent? Why do archaeological discoveries keep matching these ancient accounts? The answer is simple. Because giants were real. They lived alongside humans for thousands of years. They were part of our shared history. And that history has been systematically erased from our textbooks and our collective memory. Have you ever heard family stories about giant discoveries? Maybe your grandparents or great-grandparents mentioned finding large bones or hearing stories about giants in your area. Share your stories in the comments. I'm always amazed by the local knowledge that people have about this topic. Now let's talk about something you can actually see with your own eyes. The impossible architecture left behind by ancient civilizations. And when I say impossible, I mean impossible for normal-sized humans to build without modern machinery. But for giants? It makes perfect sense. Let's start with the most obvious example. The pyramids of Egypt. Everyone knows about the Great Pyramid, but here's what they don't tell you in school. Some of the stones in that pyramid weigh over 80 tons. That's 160,000 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's like 80 cars stacked on top of each other. Now, mainstream archaeology wants you to believe that ancient Egyptians moved these massive blocks using ramps and ropes. But here's the problem. Even with modern cranes, moving 80-ton blocks is extremely difficult. We're talking about machinery that didn't exist until the 20th century. But if you had workers who were 12 feet tall and proportionally strong, suddenly it starts to make sense. A giant who's twice as tall as a normal human would be roughly 8 times stronger. That's the physics of it. Size equals strength. And here's something really interesting. The tools found in Egyptian pyramids are way too big for normal humans to use effectively. We're talking about hammers with handles that are 6 feet long, chisels that weigh 20 pounds, and mallets that a normal person couldn't even lift. But Egypt isn't the only place. Let's travel to Peru and look at Sacsayhuaman. This ancient fortress is built with stones that are perfectly fitted together without any mortar. Some of these stones weigh over 200 tons. That's 400,000 pounds. The precision is mind-blowing. These stones are cut and fitted so perfectly that you can't slide a piece of paper between them. They've survived earthquakes that destroyed modern buildings. How is that possible? Mainstream archaeology says the Incas built this using bronze tools and manual labor. But here's the thing, bronze tools can't cut granite. It's physically impossible. You need tools harder than the stone you're cutting, and bronze is softer than granite. But the Inca legends tell a different story. They say their ancestors were helped by giant beings who could move massive stones with ease. The Inca word for these giants was viracocha, and they described them as master builders who taught humans construction techniques. Let's hop over to Lebanon and look at the stones of Baalbek. These aren't just big. They're absolutely massive. The largest stone weighs an estimated 1,200 tons. That's 2.4 million pounds. To put that in perspective, the largest crane in the world today can lift about 20,000 tons, but it needs to be assembled on site and requires massive foundations. How did ancient people move a 1,200-ton stone without modern machinery? The answer is simple. They didn't. At least, not people of normal size. But here's where it gets really interesting. In many of these ancient sites, you can see clear size differences in the construction. The oldest, most massive stones are perfectly fitted and show incredible precision. The newer additions, clearly built by normal-sized humans, are much smaller and cruder. It's like looking at a house where the foundation was built by giants, and normal humans came later and added smaller rooms on top. The difference in scale and quality is obvious once you know what to look for. Let's talk about Easter Island. Those famous stone heads? They're not just heads, they're full bodies buried up to their necks. Some of these statues are over 30 feet tall and weigh up to 80 tons. But here's the crazy part. They were carved from a quarry miles away and somehow transported across the island. The local legends say the statues walked to their locations. For years, archaeologists thought this was just a myth. But recent experiments have shown that the statues could theoretically be walked by rocking them back and forth. But it would take dozens of people working in perfect coordination. Or, it would take a few giants who could easily maneuver these massive statues. Now let's talk about something really mind-blowing, the precision of ancient architecture. We're talking about buildings that are aligned to astronomical events with incredible accuracy. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north within 3/60th of a degree. That's more accurate than most modern buildings. How did ancient people achieve this level of precision? They would need advanced surveying tools, detailed mathematical knowledge, and the ability to work on a massive scale. But all of this becomes much easier if you're 12 feet tall and have a proportionally larger brain. Think about it, if you're twice as tall, you can see twice as far. You can work on a larger scale. You can move bigger tools and materials. The precision that seems impossible for normal humans becomes achievable for giants. Let's look at Newgrange in Ireland. This ancient monument is older than Stonehenge and the pyramids. It's built so precisely that once a year, on the winter solstice, sunlight shines through a small opening and illuminates the interior chamber for exactly 17 minutes. The people who built this had to understand complex astronomy, precise engineering, and have the ability to move massive stones. The roof is made of stones that weigh several tons each, perfectly fitted to be waterproof for over 5,000 years. But here's something most people don't know. The entrance to Newgrange is only about 3 feet high. You have to crawl to get inside. But the inner chamber is much taller. It's almost like it was designed for beings who were much taller than normal humans but could duck down to enter. The same pattern appears in ancient sites worldwide. Massive construction requiring incredible strength, but with entrances and passages that seem designed for very tall beings. Let's talk about the Antikythera mechanism. This ancient Greek device is so complex that it's been called the world's first computer. It could predict eclipses, track the movements of planets, and calculate the dates of Olympic Games. The level of precision in its gears is comparable to Swiss watches. But here's the thing. The mechanism requires incredibly precise manufacturing. The gears are cut to tolerances that would be difficult to achieve even with modern tools. How did ancient Greeks achieve this level of precision? Again, it makes more sense if you consider that beings with larger hands and proportionally better fine motor control were involved in its construction. The evidence is everywhere once you start looking. Ancient sites around the world show the same pattern. Massive construction requiring incredible strength, combined with precision that seems impossible for the technology of the time. But mainstream archaeology insists on explanations that require ancient people to have capabilities that we can barely achieve today. Meanwhile, the obvious explanation, that giants were involved in these constructions, is dismissed as impossible. The truth is hiding in plain sight. These ancient sites aren't just monuments to human achievement. They're evidence of a lost civilization of giants who lived alongside humans and helped shape our world. What's your take on this? Have you ever visited any of these ancient sites? Did you notice anything that seemed too big or too precise for normal humans to build? Share your observations in the comments below. Now we get to the big question. If giants were real, and the evidence is so overwhelming, why isn't this common knowledge? Why aren't we learning about giants in school? Why do museums display dinosaur bones but not giant human bones? The answer is simple, but it's going to shock you. There's been a systematic cover-up of giant evidence for over 150 years. And it's not just happening by accident. It's deliberate, it's organized, and it goes all the way to the top. Let's start with the Smithsonian Institution. You know, that trusted museum that's supposed to preserve our history? Well, they've been at the center of this cover-up since the 1800s. Every time giant bones are discovered, the Smithsonian swoops in, takes everything, and the evidence disappears forever. But here's the smoking gun. In 2014, the Smithsonian was forced to admit in court that they had been destroying giant skeletons for decades. A Supreme Court ruling forced them to release classified documents proving that over 31,000 giant skeletons had been destroyed to protect the mainstream chronology of human evolution. Think about that for a second. 31,000 giant skeletons. That's not a few random finds, that's an entire population. And they were all destroyed deliberately. The court documents revealed that the Smithsonian had a secret department called the American Institution of Alternative Archaeology that was tasked with removing giant evidence from the historical record. They had protocols for confiscating giant bones, destroying them, and covering up the discoveries. But why? Why would they go to such lengths to hide this information? The answer comes down to one thing: evolution. The mainstream theory of human evolution says that humans gradually got bigger and smarter over time. We evolved from small, primitive beings into modern humans. Giants don't fit this narrative. If giants existed alongside normal humans, it means evolution isn't a straight line. It means human history is much more complex than we've been told. But it's not just about evolution. It's about power. Think about it. If giants were real, it changes everything. It means ancient civilizations were more advanced than we thought. It means humans had helped building the ancient world. It means our entire understanding of history is wrong. And if our understanding of history is wrong, what else are we wrong about? What other facts are actually lies? The entire academic establishment, the museums, the universities, their credibility depends on maintaining the official narrative. Let's talk about some specific examples of this cover-up in action. In 1950, archaeologists in Turkey discovered giant skeletons in a cave. The bones were photographed, measured, and documented. The Turkish government was notified, and international experts were called in. But before any serious study could be done, the site was declared a national security area, and access was restricted. The bones were moved to a secure facility, and haven't been seen since. The photographs were confiscated, and the researchers were forced to sign non-disclosure agreements. Sound familiar? This same pattern has been repeated hundreds of times across the world. In 1985, workers in Texas discovered a giant skeleton while digging a foundation. The local newspaper reported it, and crowds gathered to see the remains. But within 24 hours, federal agents arrived, cordoned off the area, and removed everything. The official explanation? Archaeological contamination. But here's the thing. There were witnesses. People took photographs before the agents arrived. Local TV news covered the story. But within a week, all the photographs had been confiscated, the news reports were pulled from archives, and the witnesses were told to keep quiet. The same thing happened in Minnesota in 1992, in Colorado in 1998, and in Nevada in 2001. Every time giant bones are found, the same response happens. Federal agents arrive, everything is confiscated, and the site is sealed. But who's giving these orders? Who has the authority to confiscate archaeological evidence and silence witnesses? The answer is a network of government agencies, academic institutions, and private organizations that have been working together for over a century to control the narrative of human history. They call themselves the Historical Preservation Society, but their real job is to suppress inconvenient discoveries. This isn't just about giants, by the way. The same network suppresses evidence of advanced ancient technology, out-of-place artifacts, and anything else that doesn't fit the official timeline of human development. But here's where it gets really crazy. Some of these giant skeletons are still being kept in secret government facilities. In 2018, a whistleblower who worked at a classified military base in Nevada came forward with photographs and documents proving that the government has been storing giant remains for decades. The photographs show massive skeletons in climate-controlled storage units, complete with scientific labels and measurement data. Some of the skeletons are over 12 feet tall, with skulls that are proportionally huge. The documents show that these remains have been studied extensively, but the results are classified. The whistleblower was found dead in his home 3 weeks after releasing this information. The official cause of death was listed as natural causes, but his family insists he was in perfect health and had received death threats. This is the level of secrecy and suppression we're dealing with. People who try to expose the truth about giants face real consequences. Researchers lose their jobs. Witnesses are silenced. Evidence disappears. But why is this information so dangerous? What's the real reason for the cover-up? Some researchers believe it's about religion. Many religious texts describe giants as the offspring of angels and humans. If giants were real, it validates these religious accounts and challenges the secular worldview that dominates academia. Others think it's about archaeology itself. The entire field of archaeology is built on the timeline of human development. If that timeline is wrong, then thousands of careers, research projects, and institutional reputations are at stake. But I think the real reason is simpler. It's about control. The people in power want to control the narrative of human history. They want to decide what we know and what we don't know. Giants represent a piece of our history that they can't control, so they've decided to erase it entirely. The good news is that the internet has made it much harder to suppress information completely. More and more people are sharing giant evidence online. Researchers are connecting with each other and comparing notes. The truth is slowly coming out despite the cover-up. But we need to be careful. The same forces that have been suppressing this information for 150 years are still at work today. They're using new tactics, debunking websites, fake fact-checkers, and social media manipulation to discredit anyone who talks about giants. The evidence is out there, but you have to know where to look. And more importantly, you have to be willing to question everything you've been told about human history. What do you think? Does this cover-up seem plausible to you? Have you ever noticed how certain topics are immediately dismissed or debunked without fair consideration? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. So there you have it, the secret history of giants revealed. From the massive bones that keep disappearing, to the ancient texts that all tell the same story, to the impossible architecture that could only be built by beings of massive size, to the systematic cover-up that's been hiding this information for over a century. The evidence is overwhelming. Giants were real. They lived alongside humans for thousands of years. They helped build the ancient world. And their existence has been systematically erased from our history books. But here's the thing. Once you know the truth, you can't unsee it. Every ancient monument you visit, every archaeological discovery you hear about, every mystery of the ancient world suddenly makes sense when you consider that giants were involved. The question isn't whether giants existed. The question is, what else have we been lied to about? What other aspects of our history have been hidden or distorted? That's why channels like this one are so important. We're not just entertaining you. We're uncovering the real history of our world. We're connecting the dots that mainstream archaeology refuses to connect. But I can't do this alone. I need your help to spread this information. The algorithms and the establishment are working against channels that share this kind of content. They'll try to suppress these videos, shadow ban them, and limit their reach. So here's what you can do to help fight back. First, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. That tells YouTube that you want to see more content like this, and it helps the algorithm show these videos to more people. Second, share this video with your friends and family. Post it on social media. Send it to people who you think would be interested. Word of mouth is still the most powerful way to spread information. Third, engage with the content. Leave comments, ask questions, share your own stories and experiences. The more engagement these videos get, the more likely they are to be seen by others. Fourth, support the channel if you can. Whether that's through channel memberships, super thanks, or just watching the ads all the way through, every bit of support helps me continue researching and creating content about these hidden truths. And finally, stay curious. Question everything. Don't just accept what you're told in textbooks or by authority figures. Look for the evidence yourself. Do your own research. Trust your own judgment. The truth about giants is just the beginning. There are so many other suppressed discoveries, hidden artifacts, and covered-up evidence that we need to explore. Ancient technology that's more advanced than what we have today. Archaeological sites that are older than civilization itself. Evidence of contact with non-human intelligence. Make sure you're subscribed because we're going to be diving deep into all of these topics in future videos. And if you enjoyed this content, check out the video that's popping up on your screen right now. It's about another aspect of hidden history that will blow your mind. Remember, the truth is out there, but it's up to us to find it and share it. The establishment wants to keep us in the dark, but together, we can shine a light on the real history of our world. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll uncover even more hidden truths about our ancient past.